that I could come back over. For the first time, I didn't very off to. I chalked it up to the weird layout, the draft, and the lack of sunlight in the rear of the house, too. Upstairs was 2 bedrooms, though, and a bathroom in the middle. The front bedroom was warm and sunny, and the rest of the upstairs was just very cold, though. Noticeably colder than the rest of the house, in fact. Upon entering the back upstairs bedroom, it felt like a downward shift, though. Like the energy in that room felt so strange, and I felt like I just wasn't wanted in there.
Just a random BS test of your tips there, mate. Did you purchase these tips? What? No.
B samples BS, Sarge. Paying $39.99 a month.
Here's a tip for free. Download the Sportsbet app. It's got everything you need to make betting easy, including same race multi. Combine multiple runners in the same race for bigger odds. Also, just get your tips.
I know, sounds weird, but I barely looked around and just closed the door behind me. In the first couple of weeks, nothing much happened, but I just never felt at ease. I felt like I was being watched. I wrote it off as being easily spooked in a large house, and it was my first time living alone too. But soon I started having trouble sleeping despite my room, the upstairs front bedroom, being the only place in the house that I ever felt at ease. One night though, I decided to smoke and watch a movie in the living room kind of late at night. I fell asleep on the couch and woke up to what I swore was someone running up the stairs and then slamming the back bedroom door. My dog looked startled too and ran upstairs and started growling at the closed door. I quickly went up there to check it out, but no one was in there. Some nights after that too, I heard footsteps pacing in the back room. The next thing that started happening though was while I was in the bathtub in the upstairs bathroom. My dog would lay in the doorway and just stare at that back room. Sometimes he would growl or bark at it. I would also come home to find the door open when I had definitely shut it, or I would hear my cat meowing to be let in the room. On a couple of occasions, I found my cat shut in that room too, and also around this time my bath towel went missing, and I looked absolutely everywhere for it but couldn't find it. All of this, it began to take a real toll on me too. I started having nightmares every night, and I would wake up almost every night to my dog whining between 3 and 4 in the morning. I always felt like I was being watched in the house, and the whole thing just felt so heavy. I told Amy about all this, and she confessed to me that she had some weird experiences in that house too when she lived there as well. Her bedroom was the back room, and a couple of times she woke up in a sort of semi-dream state to a man at the end of her bed and began talking to it. She then woke up for real and saw texts from her roommate asking who she was talking to. She also would see things moving out of the corner of her eye, hear footsteps, and feel like she was being watched. She told me of an instance of seeing footsteps in the snow going from the back door to the middle of the lawn and just disappearing. But one day, I was in the living room, hearing footsteps, and just felt so overwhelmed by the presence. I was crying and decided to have a go talking to it. I said, "Hey, listen, I know that this is your house too. I'm leaving in a month, okay? I've been through so much pain these past few months. Please, just leave me alone. Just let me know that you've heard me too, okay?" And then the door upstairs slammed shut instantly. And that was the last that I'd heard of it for a while. What I mean is that my nightmares stopped, I started sleeping through the night, and felt less of the presence, if that makes sense. One night though, I was hanging out with Amy in her backyard with our dogs and her downstairs neighbour, Sam, to celebrate me finding an apartment finally. I went back into my house for some more beers and to grab a sweater. I went to run up the stairs, and standing there, at the top of the stairs, was what I can only describe as an opaque black silhouette. I couldn't make out any features, but it was as real as a person standing there. I screamed, and I ran back down and turned on the stairway light, only to find nobody there, and the back room open. Finally, though, my move-out date arrived, and I felt so relieved to feel absolutely nothing in my new apartment. I did go back to the house one last time to check to see if I forgot anything, and there, right in the middle of the floor of the back room, was my bath towel, still slightly damp as if I just used it. I have no idea how it got there. I have no idea where it went all this time. One thing is for sure, I have not been back to that place since then. In 2001, I was about 17. My family moved to the coast because my father had just gotten a job in the area. Because it was a bit of an urgent move too, and the amount of rental properties that were available immediately were very few, we had to move into a 3-bedroom house that needed some work. It was meant to be a temporary home until we found something more suitable, I guess, but we just needed to go to school and work in the meantime, and so we took it. The previous tenants weren't the tidiest of people, so we spent days cleaning while already living in the house. I remember my mother commenting that the house just didn't want to be cleaned too. We painted the walls, but stains would always appear, regardless of how many coats we applied to. We eventually had to carry on with our lives though, and it was only meant to be a temporary situation after all, so we didn't get too fussed about it. Being a teenager though, and a middle child, I spent quite some time by myself in my room. Mostly I would listen to music at night while lying on my bed, relaxing before I would get tired enough to fall asleep. At one point though, something strange started happening. I would be lying on my bed with my eyes closed, and I swear that I could feel the bed sink next to my feet as if someone was sitting down. I assumed it was my old cat jumping up on my bed, but when I looked to see where he was, so I could pet him, he wasn't there. I shrugged it off as nothing at the time, just my overthinking it. I thought that maybe I was just drifting off into sleep or something, but it happened again and again, and I soon realized that it was never my cat. In fact, I also noticed that my cat didn't ever come into my room. None of our cats did. I started getting slightly concerned after a while. I mentioned it to my mum, thinking to myself that it sounded like nothing, a mere trick of the mind. I still felt uneasy though, if I'm being honest. It was like there was something wrong, something I couldn't prove or even see. A nagging sense that I just wasn't alone in my room. I stopped sleeping with my curtains drawn. They were always open now. I needed the natural light coming from outside to feel safe enough to sleep, I suppose. And my concerns were confirmed one night that I still remember clearly to this day, almost 20 years later. So, I woke up, just suddenly terrified. I had an intense fear, unlike anything that I'd ever experienced before or ever since. And I couldn't move. There was also a tree outside of my room casting shadows on my cupboard, which was right in front of my bed. And somehow I just knew that there was something bad right there in front of me, among those shadows. I could feel it, like an overwhelming presence filling the space in front of me, an evil, threatening presence. I saw too that one of the shadows on my cupboard was moving, and this shadow was much darker and moved with intention is the only way that I can put it. As soon as I spotted it, I knew that that was the source of my fear. I did the only thing that I could to protect myself too. I prayed. After what felt like forever trapped, I was finally able to move. Still terrified, too terrified to go past my cupboard to the door right next to it, I hid under my blanket. 17 years old and hiding under a blanket like the boogeyman was under my bed. Eventually, I fell asleep in the early hours of the morning as daylight started coming through the windows. I know what sleep paralysis is, and I'm convinced that this wasn't it. The fear that I felt that night as I hid in my bed, feeling like I'm not alone in my room, is something that I'll never forget. A month or two after the incident, my parents found a better place, thankfully. I was scared of my room until we moved too. I always slept with my head under the covers and made sure enough light was coming into the room, and after we moved, it was like my family finally felt safe enough to speak about the darkness that we all knew was in that house. My brother told us about a dark figure that he saw moving through the corridor area in the kitchen. My father said that he saw a dark shape in the corridor near my room, but it was what my mother told me after we'd moved that shook me the most. She told me that when a family friend and his wife visited us and stayed in my room, he told my mother the following day that there was something evil in there. He was known for sensing the supernatural and seemed quite spooked to my mother as he was telling her this, and I could see when she was telling me about this that she was spooked as well. When I asked her what he said exactly, as I was recollecting my memories to tell this story, she said that he had just said that he didn't want to elaborate on it, because if he did, that he would never go into that room again. And well, that's not much better, I thought. The family friend has since then passed away without ever really elaborating on what exactly he sensed in that house. My mother also told me that she heard that the couple that moved in after us had a priest come to cleanse the house too. I still am suspicious of every house that I move into after this, now with my own family. I'm making sure to burn sage every so often. I just don't ever want to share a house with something evil like that ever again. Six years ago, I was a new mum, learning to balance my job, family, and health. My social life primarily existed on the internet at this time, and Facebook and Instagram were the main ways that I kept in contact with others. I received a friend request from Stephen, an old friend from high school, and I accepted, and everything was normal for a while. After a couple of months, Stephen sent a DM asking how I was. The conversation was fine, I guess, but it didn't take too long for me to realize that this wasn't the Stephen that I knew. They had the same first and common last name. His profile picture was not a picture of himself, so I never realized that this was a different person. Either way, we had several mutual friends, and he didn't do anything especially creepy, so I left him on my friends list. He would occasionally message and chat, and he just seemed like someone that was a bit socially awkward, but harmless. I would always respond, but kept the conversations brief. Now one day, I got a text from him, which really surprised me because I never gave him my number. I asked how he got my number, and he said from my website, which was fair, I'll admit. I'm an artist and had email and phone contact info on my art site. He began texting several times a day, and I would give him short responses, followed with something like, "At work, talk to you later," or "Dinner with the fam, have a good evening." He started talking about his new boyfriend, saying that he was one of the few gay conservatives and things were going well. I told him that I'm glad that he has a partner that aligns with him and wished them well. He sort of then began talking a lot about conservative politics and was really aggressive about it. I told him that I was a liberal, so it was probably best that we didn't have these conversations. It was at this point that his messages began turning sexual, where he would ask if I wanted to hear about the sex parties him and his boyfriend threw. I told him no, I didn't really know him and it was inappropriate. One day I was busy with work and returned to my phone to see dozens of messages from him, angry that I wasn't responding, and he went on and on sharing very graphic sexual stories. I responded and told him that I'd been polite to him because he seemed like he didn't have many friends, but this was too much and I was blocking him. I told him that I didn't believe that he was gay, in fact, and he was just saying it in an attempt to make me think that he was harmless. I proceeded to block him on social media and I blocked his phone number too. A couple of days later, though, I started getting lots of friend requests from accounts that I didn't have mutual friends with. I knew that they were probably fake pages that he was creating. I would block them and move on. Then I began getting phone calls and texts from fake phone numbers. Same thing, I would block them and move on. I messaged our mutuals to ask what they knew about him, and surprisingly, none of them actually knew him. He had just requested them, and they accepted apparently. And he began sending requests to my friends, family, and other women that I knew. I let everyone know that they needed to block him, and for months, not a day passed that I didn't get a weird call or friend request or DM or something. It would range from a normal, "Hey, how are you?" to vague threats of, "I could make you talk to me if I really wanted to." He lived several hours away though, so I wasn't particularly concerned. And things got quieter. Until one evening, my notifications started going off like crazy, and my phone was ringing with unknown numbers. It was on my art page too, that probably 15 different accounts had posted, well, explicit images on my page, or things like OP is a whore, or OP is a thief, and things like this. I knew it was him too, because he also accidentally posted from his real account. I didn't realize that I never blocked him from that page. He also sent a message to my art page saying sorry for that, and he missed his friend and he was just trying to get my attention. I didn't respond. I just blocked him, and I even called the police at this point. But since stalking and harassment laws are pretty much awful, they didn't do anything. Later that night though, I must have woken up at around 2 o'clock in the morning, for no reason other than I was just having trouble sleeping. I was up for a while playing on my phone when I started hearing a strange sound coming from the living room. It was back and forth between quiet cracking and scratching, and at the time we lived in a large ranch house and the living room was at the other end of a long hall. I got up thinking that my cats were into something, or maybe after a mouse or something. I flipped on the living room light and the sound immediately stopped. I scanned around looking for my cats when I noticed an open window. Our windows were large from floor to ceiling and opened by pulling down from the top. And the top of the window still had pry marks, and the lock, it was now broken. Thankfully, this house was old and the windows did not open easily, and he had only been able to open it about 8 inches. But I immediately woke up my husband, got my son out of his room, and called the cops. I knew that it was Stephen too. It was too big of a coincidence that he blew up that day and then someone tries to break into my house in the middle of the night like that. Well, we couldn't prove it was him, obviously. There was no evidence other than what happened that day that pointed to him. But the police did speak to him, and I believe it scared him enough to leave me alone. I was obviously horrified at the time, and I began looking up anything that I could to find out more about him. And I wound up finding his YouTube channel, which solidified my fears even more. He posted Rush Limbaugh-style rants when he would get angrier and angrier until he was red-faced and nearly spitting. He frequently talked about violence and would show off his gun collection. This led me to finding out his real name too. I googled his name and found that he had apparently been arrested 2 years prior for holding a woman against her will in a hotel and attempted to assault her. Thankfully, she was able to escape with just a bloody lip. We moved not long later, and I removed my phone number from my site and locked down all of my social media. I still sleep with a baby monitor in my son's room because I'm scared of someone coming in at night. His YouTube channel, it was shut down after a bit too, and I haven't heard from him since. Myself and my mother were driving. Where, I can't really recall because it was a long time ago. But I do remember her pulling up to a stop sign. We seemed to be sitting at this stop sign for what seemed like the longest stop ever too. For a stop sign, that is. I remember her looking both ways. She looked right and then she looked left. I remember her gazing at me from her rearview mirror. She had such a gentle smile upon her face, as a loving mother would, looking at her child with such love. Just then, her face went from joyous to complete worry and panic. I see her eyes pan from me to the seat next to me. I hear the back passenger door open. As I'm turning my attention from my mother to the noise of the car door opening, I see this man entering the car. He sits next to me and continues to tell my mother to drive. It was a different kind of vibe from this man, though. He didn't seem to be pleased by either one of us in the car. Even the fact that he just hopped in the car with people that he didn't even know was weird. He seemed so very calm, though. Said very little, but enough to get his point across. He had long, salted hair. At the time, I thought that he had dreadlocks, but as an adult, I believe that his hair was most likely ratty from not brushing or washing it. His clothes were worn, torn, dirty, and dulled from the sun. I remember seeing his toes peeking out of these, what were once black work boots. His jeans were tied together from where they had been torn and ripped. His skin seemed so badly sun-kissed and filthy from the lack of bathing. An odor was coming from this guy, too, that truly had my nose hairs curling. The smell filled the car, and I could tell my mother could smell it too, because she kept wiping the back of her hand across her nose. My mother told the man that she wanted him to get out of the car. Her voice, she was trying to be stern and demanding, but she was such a kind-hearted woman that her yelling sounded like she was singing. So, of course, the man disregarded her chirps. He sat in the back seat and said, "Drive, please, just up the way." I so badly wanted to glare and stare at this guy, but I didn't want to upset him too. I'm leaning as far as I can against my door with my head down and hands in my lap. I feel the car jerk forward. I can hear my mother breathing heavily, as she's obviously worried about this guy in the back seat with me. I can't say that I was really scared of him or anything. I guess I was just more curious as to how he could just so boldly get into a car with strangers and be so cool about it. I was always taught never to take rides from people that I didn't know. So, where was he going, I had thought? Where does he live? I can only imagine the things that were going through her mind as she's driving a complete stranger up the street with her kid in the back with him, not even 3 feet away from me. The car continues to drive down the road a ways more. Then he leans forward from the seat, gazing out the window, watching the scenery go by, his hand on the handle of the door. He says, "Here," and my mother quickly jerks the car to the dirt, the car skidding to gain traction to bring the car to a complete stop. His passenger door flung open, and he bolts up and out from the car, and he didn't even get a chance to close the door himself. My mother had sped off so fast, too, that the car slammed the door shut, and then I hear the car doors lock. When I was younger, 17, I lived in a small village of like 1,200 people. Usually every year there's this local town festival, and all the adults go out for dinner and party at the town hall, where they perform some acting and make fun of the year that just passed. Usually this is in February, so it's snowy and dark pretty early. And when this festival is on, there are absolutely all 13 to 17-year-old girls booked for babysitting. Me and friends, we went for a drive around the town since you have to be 18 to go to the party, so we just sort of drove around giving people lifts to the party and earned some extra cash. Since there's no taxi in town, this was a great way to get some extra pocket money, I guess. But we'd been driving for maybe a good hour now, and of course we knew where everyone lived, and some of the adults asked us to drive past their house to make sure everything is alright and give the parents some extra comfort. I think it was also to give us some tasking until the party was over so they could get a lift home. But in one of the older neighborhoods in the town, there were these low floodlights. We would just drive slowly, and one mum who we gave a lift earlier lived there. She was a widow with 3 young children, 2, 4, and 8, if I recall correctly, and her niece was babysitting, and she was 15. The time had been around 10 p.m, I would guess, when we drove in this neighborhood, which is surrounded by hills and some cliffs. My friend swore that he saw something move in her garden. We didn't think much of it, They just sort of said that it was probably a cat or something. We kept driving to the other end of town, but my friend in the...
Shit.
Okay, what's all the commotion?
Oh, it's bad. This one bloke's just forwarding random racing tips into a group.
Especially for me, with Winnie the Pooh character. They don't even take
Oh.
everything. Actually made me try on several pairs, and he even put his... I've been debating on sharing this for a few weeks now, and I figured why not, right? I mean, spooky season is practically here already. So, this happened back in October of 2013, during my senior year of high school. My sister, who could really be called a medium, and I had been browsing the web for urban legends when we stumbled upon an article about a game known as the Game of 100 Candles. In short, this game was a sort of ritual, very similar to the way Bloody Mary is supposed to work. So, to put a long story short, the people playing this game are to light 100 candles and tell a ghost story and then blow out one of the candles. At the end of the game, you should have conjured 100 separate spirits. And, like every ritual game, it warns you to play at your own risk. But, no big deal, right? None of these things are real. So, we found a night where our mum wouldn't be home until after 2 a.m. and planned for our game. My sister, her best friend T, and another friend N, and myself prepared for our night. We waited until our mum left and for the sun to begin to set, and then we proceeded to set up our kitchen. We set up 100 tea candles on the counter and found a box of matches, and as the sun sank lower, we shut off the lights in our house and opened up our glass door, so the smoke from the candles wasn't too bad, and turned off our cell phones. And around 7:30, once it was perfectly dark, we started the game by lighting the candles. At first, we just told light-hearted stories, like I saw a ghost and it went boo kind of thing. As we finished the first 10 candles, there was a palpable change in the atmosphere around us, though. But the air had a static feel to it, and the hair on my neck and my arms began to stand on end. As mentioned, my sister qualifies as a medium who can see and feel things that are not apparent to the naked eye, and even she began to squirm in her chair. As we started the next set of candles, 11 to 20 this time, the house became painfully quiet. The stories also began to grow darker. The stories that we told went from silly folklore to real-time accounts of just strange things that we had seen. As the candles were blown out, we began hearing creaking and cracking around us. Now, we did live in an older house, but the house never groaned or cracked. Well, at least not this loudly before. So, we finished the next set of 10, and everyone playing was visibly beginning to feel uncomfortable. I mean, the laughter had stopped, and a more somber tone had taken over. Again, we ignored the strange sounds and just continued to play. As the time passed and it grew closer to 8:45, the game took a... It began turning on the lights and moving as a group, and although the candles were out and the game was over, there was still this really heavy feeling all around. We moved to our dining room, where we had heard the thud earlier, to turn the rest of the lights on. We entered the room as a group and turned on the lights, and Halloween decorations littered the ground like they'd been thrown from their original places. On top of our server was my mum's old battery-powered witch. Her motor had burned out years ago, and we never put batteries in anymore, and she was just simply sitting there. But we started hearing a cracking noise. Before Anne says, "If you're really here, I need a sign." And this is when shit just really hit the fan. We heard heavy, loud footsteps coming down the hallway and the doors creaking open. The flames of the candle started to waver with no wind, and Anne grabbed my hand and whispered that something was breathing behind him, even though I'm seated to his right and my sister and her friend are directly across from us and we couldn't see anything. Anne freezes up, though, and then turns around suddenly with nothing behind him. And then, with nothing near it, The doors that we had left open slowly creaked shut, with no wind present. Then, T says that someone is touching his arm, and then his neck, and then his face. At this time, we just decided to stop playing. I believe the exact phrase was, "Fuck this, I'm done, say goodbye." So, we did. We extinguished the rest of the candles and began turning on the lights and moving as a group. And although the candles were out and the game was over, there was still this really heavy feeling all around. We moved to our dining room, where we had heard the thud earlier, to turn the rest of the lights on. We entered the room as a group and turned on the lights, and Halloween decorations littered the ground like they'd been thrown from their original places. On top of our server was my mum's old battery-powered witch. Her motor had burned out years ago, and we never put batteries in anymore, and she was just simply sitting there. But we started hearing a cracking noise from the corner of the room. We slowly turned around to see that the witch was rocking and bringing her wrinkled hands together, slowly getting faster and faster until the witch just fell over. As her body hit the ground, we heard the loud bang of a door or cabinet slamming shut somewhere else in the house too. And suddenly, our friend T screamed that his face was burning. We turned around and he had a small scratch on his face and a trickle of blood was running down his cheek. And that was it. We grabbed phones and keys and just ran out of the house, dropped our friends off and didn't return home until much later. When we did eventually return home though, another friend came over to stay up with us until our mum got home. We turned on cartoons and cranked the volume and just tried to ignore the banging and the footsteps and the heavy breathing that wandered through our house for the rest of the night. In the years following our night of playing 100 Candles, we've seen quite a bit of activity in our home. I've shared this in other places, but I sincerely believe that this was a catalyst for the activity in our home. I have since moved, but my sister, she remains in our home and still frequently experiences phenomena, including seeing the shadowy figure occasionally. Hindsight is 20/20, and we really should have listened to the warnings, I know, but we were young and curious. Many years ago, I worked on an ambulance first responding to 911 calls and all that. One day, we were dispatched to a person not acting right type of call. When my partner and I arrived at the apartment complex, the first thing we noted was that all the people, except for the patient that were living in the same unit, they were standing outside with terrified looks on their faces, shaking violently. It was raining and it was nighttime outside, but I quickly approached them and asked what was going on. The 25-year-old male looked at me and said, "Yeah, so, we were just playing a game when suddenly my girlfriend just started shrieking and screaming. All the lights went out, including the candles, and then we saw her lay on her stomach on top of the board game. My girlfriend's head, hands, and legs, they all went into the air, and then suddenly she just fell to the floor, stood up, and ran into the back of the apartment." My partner and I then cautiously walked up the steps to the apartment door with the mag lights. The door was already cracked open, so I politely knocked and introduced myself as a 911 ambulance paramedic before walking inside the apartment unit. And the light switch didn't work, but I could hear a creaking wooden noise in the background, just squeaking back and forth. All the walls were painted dark colors like black and maroon, and it was obvious that these people liked heavy metal, skulls, and dark paintings because they were represented all over the walls. I started walking through the apartment calling out for the patient, looking for any sign of her. As I walked deeper and deeper into the unit, it just started getting colder and colder. Finally, I saw her in a rocking chair. She was slowly rocking back and forth and just looking straight forward. I introduced myself to her and asked her what's going on. There was no answer from her, and she just kept rocking back and forth. I got up close to her looking for any medical abnormalities, and her eyes were so dark. Either her pupils were that big or her eye color was just that dark. But all of her other vital signs were pretty normal. Her blood sugar was normal. She didn't appear to be having any seizure activity or anything. I tried to get a painful stimulus out of her by squeezing the shoulder or a sternal rub, but she wouldn't even flinch. I couldn't find any track marks on her too for drug use or anything, and throughout all of this, she just kept rocking back and forth, just looking straight forward. The rule of thumb for paramedics now for this situation, and not being alert to person, place, time or event, is that she needs to go to the hospital. I tell her that since she's not talking with me, I'll be moving her to a stretcher. And suddenly, the rocking just stops. I mean, all sound everywhere just stops. I can only hear breathing noises now. Well, I lift under her armpits and my partner lifts under her legs, and as we lift, we notice something really strange. The patient stays in a seated form, like completely rigid. We lay her on the stretcher and wheel her to the inside of the ambulance, and as we load her into the back, cracking noises like breaking tree branches filled the air. I look over at her and notice now that she's looking right at me with a huge, scary, crazed smile on her face. And no matter where I moved, her head and eyes just tracked me with that same unwavering smile too. My partner looks over at me sympathetic, knowing that I'll have to be in the back with her. I playfully say, "Good, now maybe you'll talk to me." We begin riding to the hospital, and the heat was on full blast in the back of the ambulance, but no matter how hard we pumped it, it just wouldn't heat up. But she was still smiling that big toothy smile and staring at me too, and not answering any of my questions. I looked down to grab my pen that fell on the floor and then looked back up, and out of nowhere, the highest pitched screams and shrieks filled the air as she started lunging at me and grabbing at me. She clashed her teeth and bit at me in my direction, trying all that she could to break loose. Luckily, the stretcher seatbelts were secured to her, making me just out of reach. The huge crazed smile broke into a frightening look of terror and then anger, and my back was against the wall of the box. Luckily, we were already at the hospital, unintentionally a Catholic one, mind you, and as the ambulance drove in, the patient stopped all she was doing. She calmly looked straight back forward and just went mute again. We brought her into the ER and talked with the doctor about what had happened, who, needless to say, was pretty astonished by the story. So, a bit of backstory first. I've been best friends with this girl since high school, I think, for probably close to 15 years now, in fact. I used to practically spend more time at her house than my own. Her parents are great people, and they treated me like another daughter because my parents are pretty awful themselves. However, my best friend started dating a guy about a year and a half ago, and since they got serious, we haven't hung out much at all. She has since bought a house and moved in with him too, and I spend a lot more time at their house now, but it's been nearly 2 years since I've spent any time in her parents' home, aside from going over there for the holidays and whatnot. At some point, though, within the past year or so, her mum got really into estate sales. She would go and buy antiques and then either fill her house up with them or try to resell them on eBay. I don't know if this is related to the experiences that I've been having, but I find it hard to believe that these strange occurrences have nothing to do with all the objects belonging to the dead people that they now have in their house. Anyway, my best friend's parents contacted me about pet sitting for them while they went on vacation for a week. I was glad to do it because I owe them a lot, and honestly, I love their 3 dogs. I've known them since they were puppies, and they had the 3 dogs shut in the tiled kitchen or dining sunroom area using a baby gate. That way, if there were any accidents, it was easy to clean since there was no carpet. Plus, the oldest dog, a bulldog, overheats easily, so he likes to be sprawled out on the tiles. The bowls of dog food and water were left out for them, and I was supposed to head over there for 2 or 3 times a day to just spend maybe an hour there. No big deal. So, the first day I showed up to let the dogs outside, I had to do all my other duties. The gate between the kitchen and the rest of the house had been knocked down, though. It was honestly not really something that I had thought twice about. The dogs probably knocked it over themselves being bored or something. But two of the dogs were still in the kitchen, though. The gate had fallen in a way that prevented them from easily getting out. The bulldog was missing, though, which was a little weird because he couldn't easily get over the gate either, but I figured he probably kicked it over behind him and wandered off to nap somewhere or something. But because of his age, he is definitely the least likely to make a mess or cause trouble, so I wasn't too worried. But I realized that meant that I had to check the rest of the house for any accidents just to be safe. But first, I get the other two outside. I was going to list the things that I have to do: feed the fish, refill the food and the water bowls, etc., when I get this kind of weird feeling. The bulldog is mostly blind, but he normally